Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to a brand new F1 2021 video. I got a lot of questions about setups in the past few weeks or since the new game release, about how we should make a setup. So today I'm going to explain a little bit more about it. First thing off, don't use the preset setup because those are just shit. And time trial setups can be good sometimes, but it really depends per track. Like for Austria, for example, the time trial setup is 10.6 wings and it doesn't feel too bad, but I think it's definitely not the best you can get. There's not one best setup you can use a lot of different things and do the exact same lap time with it. So yeah, you just need to figure out what feels good for you. So let's start off with the Aero. I feel like on this game you can run quite a lot of different things. On the Aero, I would say never go lower than 4 on both the front and rear wing on this game. And I think you can have the wings, the front and the rear wing a lot closer this year. So something like 6.8 or, as I said, 10.6 can actually work in time trial. So quite a lot of different things you can try with that. But of course, if you go higher rear wing, you will create more understeer and you have to compensate that with something else. For example, the rear ride height or the rear roll bar and the rear suspension, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, as I said, probably around tracks like Budapest or Monaco you can go up to 11. Around a track like Austria, 10.6 could work, for example, but also something like 8.8 or 7.7 or 9.9. I think all could work. There are a lot of different things you can try with that. So quite free to play with that, I would say. Now let's move on to the differential. I'd say you can play around between 70 and 100 with the differential. I wouldn't go any lower because you don't really get an advantage from it. And if you go too low on a heavy traction zone, the inside wheel will start spinning, and that just makes you lose on the exit basically. So I would say play with that between 70 and 100. I think a lot of the pro players are using a little bit higher this year. On the time trial setups you can very often see 85 to 100. But basically what it does is if you go higher on the on-throttle diff, that means you get more understeer on the exit, but you will create more traction in heavy traction zones. One thing that does make it harder is that if you're on a higher on-throttle differential and you get an oversteer moment, it's a lot harder to correct than when you're 70%. So I think if you're new to the game, it's probably easier to use 75 or something like that. But if you want to find those last few tenths, you can go a little bit higher. But there's no perfect setting for that, just like everything else on the setup. Off throttle, I think you can play around not too much with that. You can very often see in time trial setups it's around 56, which is a very good base. Off throttle differential basically means that if you go lower on it, the off throttle when you're braking, for example, or turning in, the wheels are more free to move, and that creates rotation. So whenever you go lower on the differential, it creates more rotation on both on throttle and off throttle. If you go too low, so for example you go on a 50% off throttle diff, it will lock the inside wheel while braking, and then you will just completely miss the corner because locking wheels, of course, is not what you want. It will create a lot less braking efficiency. So I would say go from anywhere between 54 to 60. If you want more understeer on the entry, you go to 60, for example, and if you want more oversteer on the entry, you go to 54. So those are my advices for that. Again, you can kind of have to work together with it. If you go higher on the off diff, you need to create more rotation maybe somewhere else. So yeah. Onto the suspension geometry, I would say this right, left, left, left always works. So 250 front camber, 2 degrees on the rear camber, 5 degrees on the front toe, and 0.2 degrees on the rear toe. I think I said 5 degrees on the front toe, but it's 0.05 degrees. So yeah, this always works. You can just always run this. So yeah, I would just keep it like that, especially if you're new to the game and don't really know a lot about setups. Just keep it like that because it's more than good enough. On to the springs. As you can imagine, if you go higher, it becomes worse on bumps and curbstones. So that's one thing. Another thing I've noticed in the past few F1 games, one seems to always work very well on the front suspension and also on the front roll bar. It might not 100% of the time be the fastest, but very, very often it's the best way. So once again, if you're new to setups, I'll just run one on the front spring and one on the front roll bar. And then on the rear, both rear roll bar and rear spring, I wouldn't go very stiff on one and very soft on the other. Might work on some tracks, as I said, but usually I think you want to move them a little bit more equal, you know. As I said, they work very well together with the wings. So if you go higher on the rear spring, means you get more rotation, and then you can maybe try and stabilize it with the rear wing, or go lower on the front wing to kind of counter it, if you know what I mean. So yeah. Roll bar wise, if you're struggling with locking up the inside tire, and this also goes for the spring, but I feel like more for the roll bar. If you're struggling to lock the inside tire on the entry of a corner, you could go softer front, but usually, as I said, you're already on one. If you go stiffer on the rear, that means more load will stay on the inside tire. So if you're struggling with locking up, you could do that. Go, of course, lower on the brake bias. Yeah, a lot of things work together, of course. So if you lock that inside front tire on braking, then you could go stiffer on the rear roll bar, and then you should lock up a little bit less fast. So yeah, now onto the ride height. This is one you can play around a lot with. I would say that, again, not really one way. You know, sometimes you play lower one front ride height, and sometimes I would say 6 could work as well. They're not massive. They're not a massive change, in my opinion. On the rear, I think you shouldn't go lower than 5 ever. I would say don't even go lower than 6, and then you can try higher. On the game, I feel like higher is always more stable, which is not realistic, but that's how it works in the game. So high rear ride height makes it more stable, especially high speed. It creates downforce on the game. And yeah, of course, if you go higher on either the front or the rear, it will be more stable over a sausage curb, for example, or over bumps, because you'll probably bottom out if you go too low. But yeah, for example, turn 1 Austria, if you drive over the inside sausage curb and you have a lot of understeer over it, you could go higher. And then it should grip up a little bit more over that sausage curb. You will lose a little bit of downforce and high speed on the side you go higher on. So yeah, of course, also if you go stiffer on the rear springs, for example, you will get more rotation over that sausage curb. And the other way around, if you go softer, you'll get more understeer over the sausage curb, or it might snap away less. So yeah. Onto the brakes, I would say always run 100% brake pressure, because it seems to work very well in this game. Could go lower to like 90% maybe. So play around if you're new to the game and you're locking up a lot. Maybe try ABS or lower it by 10%. I wouldn't go any lower than 10% or 90% then on the brake pressure. So yeah, I always play in 100, but that's up to you. So yeah. Now onto the brake bias. This basically distributes the force you put into the brake. So if you go to 70%, you lock the front tires really, really fast. If you go to 50%, you might lock the rear tires really, really fast. Now, as you guys might know, on F1 2020, 50% was the one to go with. On the current version of the game, I'd say you can play between 57 and 54. Personally, I prefer to play with 56 or 55. But if you get a lot of oversteer on the entry of a corner, you can go forward, or if you're struggling with locking the rear. But this also can help you a little bit balancing the car on the entry of a corner or while braking. So yeah, you can play around with it. I would say 56, 55 works very well. So yeah, try that out. Onto the tire pressure. Basically, tire pressure, regulates tire temperature, as you might know, just like in a normal road car. If you go very high in the summer, they might pop, which obviously doesn't happen really fast, or on your normal bike. Popping is maybe a bit much for a road car, but you get what I mean. And also higher tire pressure should give you more straight line speed, as there's less rolling resistance, less rubber on the asphalt. So yeah, it creates more heat, and you have less rolling resistance, but you have got less mechanical grip, so less low speed grip, but you should have more high speed grip. So if you go lower, then you tend to overheat less, and you tend to have more mechanical grip, so slow speed corner grip, like out of a hairpin, for example. But yeah, of course, in high speed it might become very lazy, and in high speed it just, yeah, it will feel tough. It will be less reactive while turning in. The car might snap away very aggressive in a high speed corner, for example. So yeah, try to find a balance. You should try and keep the front and rear a bit on the same. So front in the middle, can't go really wrong with that, especially if you're new to the game. I'd say keep it in the middle, especially if you're spinning a lot, then the maximum is going to be very tough to drive it because you're going to be overheating a lot. So yeah, this was a very simple introduction to the car setups on F1 2021. A lot of things work together, and that's pretty complicated, of course. Might go more into depth, but this is a very simple introduction to how F1 2021 car setups work. Of course, common sense is going higher on the wings, you get more drag, and lower, you get less drag, but also less downforce, and vice versa, if you go higher, you get more downforce. So, I think I didn't say that yet on the Aero part, so I said it now. But I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial on setups. I hope it was not too complicated or not too simple. I hope I explained it well. So yeah, make sure to like and subscribe if you guys want to see more tutorials on this channel, and see you guys next time. Ciao!